Welcome back to One Bills Live. We're at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, and joining us right now is Bills General Manager Brandon Beane. How are you, Brandon?
Doing well.
Say hello to Steve. Steve's here with
Hey,
us.
Mr. Tasker. How you doing, sir?
When you shake his hand, it's apropos that you shake mine as well. So.
This is your season, isn't it? This is your time of year.
Yeah, it's fun. We're at the Combine. Talked to you guys at Senior Bowl, and some of the guys, and I enjoy meeting a lot of these players. You see them on tape all year. Who's the man behind the helmet? And just get inside. What's their knowledge of the game? What's their passion? These guys come from all different backgrounds, and we know that just from some of the guys that are on our current team and how they get to the NFL. And some guys have really overcome some great obstacles to be where they're at today, and it's fun to hear their stories and get to know them and see if they would fit what we're trying to build in Buffalo.
Give us an idea of how deep a dive you'll go, particularly at like maybe last year when you had a top 10 pick. Mm-hmm. Say you're thinking about an Ed Oliver, and you can go back and you look at maybe players on your own team that have played with him, like at the end of their college career. You call them, say what do you think about Ed, and then call their college coaches, obviously, and then their high school coaches and their science teacher. I mean, how deep do you dive? You know what I'm saying?
As deep as you can with every guy. I mean, one of the things we did back in December was I grabbed all the rookies from the schools that have guys coming out and just said, hey, tell me your thoughts on this guy. Does he work hard? You know what we're doing here. Would he fit what we're doing? And we've done that the last couple of years just to kind of, answer some questions from a teammate perspective, how they see him.
Were players honest? Did anybody say, no, not him, don't bring him?
Yeah, there were some guys who were like, yeah, you wouldn't like him.
That's good.
Most of the time it's generally pretty positive, but
right.
If there's a guy they're going, he's always late, or sometimes it's up to me the right question to ask them.
Sure.
Right.
They're not going to throw them under the bus, but if they're not giving you a quick answer of
right.
positivity, there's probably something behind it.
And then the thing this is general manager season. I mean, this is when you make your hay, but you got a lot of things in the air to juggle.
Yeah.
The combine, you got the draft, you got free agency coming up, and I asked, the question, how much. I mean, this is a preparation for something that happens after free agency. So, in a perfect world, and I asked Sean this, what's the perfect effect that free agency can have on your moving around and jumping up in the draft and needing a guy or not getting a guy?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, in a perfect world, free agency sets you up for the draft to be able to not reach and not take what you need, take what your board says you need to take for the best value of the player, and because you never go wrong drafting good football players, and that's what we have to remember. Every draft guru is always going to point to what your perceived team needs are, and there are points in the draft where you do have to start drifting towards need, but I am of the opinion, draft a good football player. That's what's going to make you strong in the long, because injuries happen in our game. So many things happen in our game to say, oh, we're set at this spot. That can change in an instant. So let's get good football players, and we'll find spots for them. Again, later in the draft, Steve, if we haven't drafted a certain position and we still need a couple, and there's no way this other position would make our roster anyway, then you start heading towards need.
Hey, Brandon, I want to ask you about your work here this week. They've changed the schedule a little bit, working out players, and I guess the workouts, at least televised workouts, start Thursday night. But you're working now, right? You're doing what, interviews and going to a couple of measurement sessions, right?
Yeah. So we start with height weight. They start them at 7 a.m. So there's 3 sessions that run till close to 10, where we see these guys by position weighing in. And then there's interviews throughout the day due to this new schedule. More of them the first couple of days are at night. So we were interviewing, our last guy finished about 11:05 last night.
And these are the 20-minute interviews?
These are the 20-minute. You get 18. They have to, depending on where the next location is, you can keep them for maybe 19, but they got to be able to be to their next team within 20 minutes.
What are you looking for in those interviews?
Yeah, so we'll watch film with these guys and just try and, a lot of these guys are prepared with the canned answers. They go to these gurus and trying to help them. So we don't get into that.
You can't blame them, by the way, for doing that.
No, you won't. Hey, that's their job as an agent, is to prepare your players. It's a job interview. And so we try to hit them with things for them other than 2 minutes of just getting to know you real quick. We try to hit them with things they can't expect. Plays on film, things like this. What type of coverage is this? What did you guys call this play? What's the personnel? Just try to pick up what their knowledge, things that they either know it or they don't.
Right.
And they don't know what plays we're bringing up.
And you're showing them video of his team.
Of his team, his plays, and all right, do you know just what you're doing, or do you know what point the laser on what if you're a receiver, do you know what the tight end's doing? Do you know what the running back's doing? Some guys, they can tell you what everybody's doing. Some guys only know what they're doing.
Yeah. Give us an idea too about this is a different kind of year for you. You're not rebuilding or anything. You're kind of maintaining. You've got a roster now that's way more tough for these guys to make as a rookie. So you got 5 picks in the 5th and 6th rounds. A couple of years, like an Austin Prohl last year, they couldn't make the team. They had to struggle to make the team. So you got all these picks in the later rounds on a team that's more difficult to make. How does that affect, your ability to sit there and say, well, is it really going to matter the guy I pick because none of these guys may make our squad? I mean, that puts you in a weird spot that you haven't been in.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. Our roster depth is getting much better from where we were in 17. And to your point, you do have to ask those questions. I think we'll truly know how deep this draft is for the Bills because everybody's got their own board in April. Once the medical's finalized, once we've met a lot of these guys here, once we've gone to some pro days to get around some more guys, watch their testing, do more interviews, and we'll narrow our board down and we'll see where the depth of the draft is in our mind. How many guys do we think truly have first-round value? How many do we think have second? Is the value of the draft in the top? Is it in the middle? Or is it late? And that should determine where we need to use our assets. If it's in the middle, let's just say the value is in the third round. Let's say that we think there's going to be a lot. Then we should be trying to move up at from the 4th and 5th if we can, and maybe there's some spots in the 2nd that we say, we're going to get just as good a player in the 3rd. Let's move back and accumulate a pick. So that's how I operate as far as moving up, moving back.
I want to ask you another question about interviews that you'll be doing this week. Do you have I know every interview would be different, but do you have a money question? Do you have like a go-to question that you might ask every player because you know what you're looking for from with that answer?
Yeah, I mean.
And what is that question?
Not specific. I try and open it up with a few things. If it's an underclassman, maybe what was your reason for coming out early? And just to hear it. Everybody's got different reasons. If it's another guy, maybe guy from Texas and he's going to school, on the East Coast. How'd you end up at, Kentucky, from Texas or something like that? What was I was recruited by this guy at Texas A&M, but he took the job at Kentucky and he was my recruiter, so I went there, or my dad played there,
right.
Just to kind of loosen them up for a minute.
But
there's some different things based on their responses. A lot of the way I like the meeting is for the position coach, maybe the coordinator too, to interact with them a lot and let me watch that and Sean and anybody else. And maybe if there's something that we think the position coach should go a little deeper on, I'm going to jump in right there and say, all right, tell me a little bit more about X or Z.
Steve we were talking in the car coming down here the other day. There must be red flags, like you hear an answer like disqualified. Wrong answer.
Yeah, well, that's funny. We had a guy yesterday who was he didn't know personnel, and it wasn't his fault. The school didn't teach him personnel, but he's been trying to learn it. And so, you asked him, hey, what's that personnel group? That's 10. And all right, well, how are you getting to 10? Like what? So what does 10? What does 10 personnel mean to you? And he starts adding up. Well, it's 1, and then there's 1 tight end, and then no. Let's start it over. All right, add it up. All right, so what would 11 be? What would we had to straighten him out, and he basically came around and said, he was BSing it. And he has been learning. His school didn't teach him that.
Yeah,
they just taught him which side of the formation to be on and what they called it. Mm-hmm. So you can't blame the kid. It doesn't mean he can't learn or doesn't know. It's and that's part of what we have to figure out in this process. Does a kid not know something because he couldn't learn it, or does he not know it because the school didn't ask him to?
They never got to it.
And one interesting thing that you mentioned in one of your previous answers is you evaluate the total draft and find out how deep the NFL kids go, and the guys behind that are guys who will not be NFL players. And that's how you define whether you keep all of your picks and get as many as you can because there's going to be that many NFL players, or you trade them away and try and get more high picks to get into the NFL kind of level of athlete in this draft.
Yeah.
So this draft is different than last year's draft, and this draft will be different than next year's draft. And that kind of sets your philosophy of whether you want to cast a wide net and get as many guys and knowing you're going to hit on a certain percentage, or throw away some picks knowing that down there they're not going to have a chance and you want to get higher into the draft, right?
Yeah, you're spot on. And part of it will be what's the depth of the positions, and then that will partly determine free agency. If there's a position we think we need to address and it looks very thin in the draft, that's one I should probably prioritize in free agency.
Gotcha.
Because I'm going to have limited options and it's supply and demand. If there's only X number at this position in the draft, guess what? They're probably other people are going to have those needs. They're probably going to get drafted a little higher than their value is. So you want to avoid that. Doesn't mean it never happens, but so part of this process is to know before free agency starts next month is how deep is this draft truly at, the running back, the receiver, the offensive tackle, the offensive center, defensive end, how across the board, where is the depth of the draft? And then as we get closer round by round, where is the value of my picks? Do I need to be moving up? Do I need to say, whoa, there's going to be a lot of value mid. Let's don't be so aggressive early. Let's back down.
With Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager here at the NFL Scouting Combine, the general belief, the consensus is this is a deep draft for wide receivers. Do you agree with that?
I do. It seems pretty deep. It seemed that way all fall, and there's nothing to me to this point. Obviously, I haven't met a lot of them yet. I've met a few in the Senior Bowl and a few here already through some of the interviews, but still more to meet, and even the ones we won't meet, we'll try to get to pro days and get around them.
And that changes, as you just said, that changes your strategy, right, going into the draft.
It definitely does. The one other piece is the medical piece. I'll circle up with our docs when we get back. The final medical stuff is a little bit later, but they can usually give me some preliminary, hey, FYI, what do you have on this guy? Because they don't know where I have this player. Sometimes they'll tell me a player, and he's going to have a surgery here in a couple of weeks, and he's not on my board. I'm like, shh. But sometimes it'll be, I got the guy sitting in the second round on my board, and they're like, hey, we got more work to do. He's coming back for the medical recheck, just so you know, you may not be comfortable with drafting him in the second round because of X.
Right. And then let me get to a couple other positions, edge rushers, pass rush specialists. Is this a deep draft for them? Is that something you would look at, do you think? Or?
Yeah, I think there's some guys there. I don't know if I want to call it deep, but I do think there's some players. The thing about the edge rushers is, we run a 4-3. There's 3-4. So some guys can play both. Some guys, our guys are generally going to have their hand in the dirt most of the time. Not all the time. Sometimes we brought Lorenzo, and he didn't necessarily have his. But so we got to make sure if it's a true 4-3 DN, or is this a guy that can play some stack linebacker like Lorenzo, but also give us some pass rush. So we got to make sure we don't draft a non-fit. So there will be some rushers. There's always some 3-4 rushers that are going to go higher than we have them valued.
Just because you don't use them.
Because we don't use them that way. So we got to make sure we draft a player that fits what we're doing. So for our, I don't necessarily want to sit here and call it deep. Maybe in a few weeks I'll tell you different. But, wide receiver is probably the one that is clearly the deepest.
So you're talking about all these new shiny new toys and players that you're going to grab off the draft board. You also have some guys on your roster that are near and dear to your heart and who've proven that they're the kind of guys you want. So you got to re-sign Tre'Davious. You got to think about Matt Milano. There's starting a growing list of guys who you've brought in, and this is the first time in your tenure here with Buffalo that now you got to start thinking about re-signing your own guys who have proven that they're the exact guys you thought they were when you drafted them. Now, what's your philosophy, and where's that process?
Yeah, I mean,
at this point of the year,
Steve, we want to draft, develop, and sign our own. That's the goal. Now, in any negotiation, it takes two, and you got to make sure that the player and his agent, do they want to be here, and then B, do they see your market value where we see your market value? And there's been guys all through my history that, man, we tried like heck to re-sign them, but we could never agree on how they saw his value versus us. So you hope you can get as many of your guys that fit. And, some of the names you mentioned you're spot on. That's why, people say, oh, you got $80 million or whatever is being put out there. Well, we still have to save money for our own. It's, we can't just go out and spend crazy in free agency and then watch our own guys walk out the door. And it's also not just 2020. I have to have my eye on 2021 and 2022
Right.
and the guys that are coming up in those. And we can't spend it full and then expect to have money for those guys, because if you do that, you're going to end up cutting guys that you don't want to then sign and save some of these other guys.
Brandon, how much, if at all, a factor is a potential new CBA when you look down the road at signing some of these free agents?
Yeah, I think agents are more paying attention to it than us. I'm just going to, until there is a new deal and we find out something, I'm going to operate as if it's status quo, because until something's done, it's in the what if territory.
Kind of guessing.
Yeah, I do think there's agents though that are trying to wait and see, okay, is the cap going to go up because of this? Is there going to be more than they expected? I think there's some unanswered questions that guys don't want to leave money on the table, so to speak. So there haven't been a lot of agreements out there.
And it's a little bit different for the agents than it is for you guys, because the agents, they're kind of in their own little world out there and each on their own little general contractor. You guys, once the thing is set, the league will give you guys a PowerPoint on here's what it means, and they'll bring you up to snuff real quick all together.
Yeah.
Right? And so the agents kind of have to do it on their own, kind of read it and have it looked at, and what do you think, and what's this mean? And you guys, as a league, are more cohesive than that and you can wait till it's all done and then say, okay, guys, here's what it is, and you don't get a piecemeal.
Yeah, I think the league's trying to do a good job. We go to a labor seminar in Dallas in December, and there it's usually updates of new not playing rules, but off the field rules and salary cap things and how things are going to count on this. And so this year in December, they did kind of school us up on some of the things that if we do go into the last year of the CBA, this will be a little bit different because it is the last year versus some of the things that could pop up if there's a new CBA and that could affect you. But there's nothing right now that would prevent us from signing someone, as our own player or heading into free agency next month.
I'm looking for an update on a couple of guys here. One of them, Jordan Phillips, who last time we heard from you, I think it was the end of the year, might have been Senior Bowl. You almost encouraged him to take a look around, see what your value is. Are you still in that mode with him? Have you had any talks with him?
Yeah, we've talked to his agent several times, and I think what we had determined, when I said that is, I talked to the agents during the year, and we check in, and some agents do a great job of checking in. How's my guy doing? I'm watching games. Is he doing what he's supposed to on the field, off the field, and things like that. And so, his agent, no different, had a lot of good conversations, and he represents other players on our team. So it's not like we hadn't talked in 6 months and all of a sudden we pick up the phone. It's one of those things that we kind of felt all along that Jordan's earned the right, and so I was kind of repeating what his group and what we kind of thought. He's earned the right to find out what his market is and see, where it goes. I mean, I think he was looking at that last year, but it was a little bit unproven, so we brought him back on the one-year deal to go out, and it was a prove-it deal. And you want to talk about taking advantage of a prove-it deal? Jordan did that. Yeah. So we love Jordan. I love Jordan. I'm a big fan of Jordan. Would I love to get him back? Yes. But it's got to be right for all of us for what we're doing, and so if he leaves us, I'll be the first guy to wish him. But at the same time, maybe we get him back, as well.
And what about Shaq Lawson?
Yes, same thing. Shaq, we didn't extend, the fifth-year option, but one of the things, called and talked to him the day we did it and said, Shaq, this does not mean we don't want you here, okay? This is just where we're at today, and you got another year to go out and prove it to us and 31 other teams, what you can do on tape. And so was very pleased with Shaq, how he played this year, and thought he did take a nice, step forward and on the field, off the field, all of that. And he is a guy that, when we first got here, I wasn't quite sure in 2017 if he was going to buy in. And I owe him a lot. And I'm sure Sean would echo that. That
he's grown. He's grown up.
He's grown up. Yeah. And that's the fun stories when guys, maybe they weren't exactly what you wanted when you got to a spot or when you got them in your hands. If it's a player you drafted, we didn't draft Shaq. And so I think people thought we're just trying to get rid of people that we didn't draft. That's not the case. We kept working with him, and he kept working. And kudos to Shaq for where he has come in his career. And, he is a free agent. His agents are going to do the same thing, and hopefully we can get him back.
Yeah, he seems to be one of those guys you rarely see. A lot of guys are up and down a little bit. Their second year's a little better or maybe a little worse if they have a really nice rookie year, and they kind of stair-step it along like up and down. Yeah. Shaq has really – elevated every year, although incrementally.
Yep.
He has never really taken that step back. He has gotten better and better. And you'd like to see a guy like him, you'd like to see him have like Jordan Phillips numbers, maybe 9.5 sacks or whatever. But he also upgraded his play in the run game as well, and he seemed to be a 3-down guy. I don't know if we'd have said that earlier in his career.
Yeah, I think he's definitely improving his pass rush. He's a very good run player.
Right.
And so that's what he's had that all along. I think continuing to improve his pass rush. And I really think him coming back and if Jordan comes back and the guys that are definitely coming back, adding Eric Washington. I don't know if you guys got into that with Sean at all, but and I don't know if you guys have met Eric Washington, but he is a really good defensive line coach, and I think you guys will see that he's going to really improve what we've got there and help the group as a whole.
Got 2 quick questions for you. And I know what you said, and I believe what you said about getting to the draft and not looking to have to fill spots because you filled in well with free agency. But is there a type of player that you look for in free agency, maybe a prototype, maybe an experienced prototype or something you're looking for in free agency as opposed to the draft?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for a damn good player.
I know that. And the draft you are as well.
Yeah, but beyond that, how Sean and I feel about culture and fit. And so any guy that we bring in here and reward with a nice contract, that sends a message to our locker room that this is the player we want. So on the field and off the field. So the best we can, we've got to put the facts together of who this person is from what we knew when he came out in the draft to maybe people who have been around him, other coaches, other players, scouts that we know. Do our own recon. It's a little harder than the draft because the draft you get your hands on these guys. A lot of these guys in free agency, they've been gone for 4 years, playing for different coaches.
Right.
So we have to kind of put our A's and B's together and see what we can come up with to who they are. And again, we want some really good players, but we also want to make sure they fit in our locker room.
It's really hard. It's almost harder to scout the pro players off the field than it is the college players, right?
Definitely. It is because guys come out, and we just talked about Shaq Lawson and can be molded. If Shaq Lawson was in a place that was dysfunctional, and we know there are dysfunctional places, if he was in one of those places, what would that have done to him?
Right.
And so you have to look at where this player's coming from. What was he coming out? Has he been in a place that that place really develops people and develops players, and guys that we've had before from there really are great pros. So I trust this. Or on the inverse is, I've gotten a couple players out of there and it's been bad every time. I'm a little hesitant.
I swear this is my last question. We had a show a couple weeks ago. We had who's got the biggest to-do list this offseason in the AFC East: Patriots, Jets, Dolphins, Bills. We didn't even think about you. But then as we got going along, we got thinking, well, the Bills got a lot of work to do this offseason. Just to make the step from 10 wins to 12 or 13, you got a lot of work to do, right?
I got the biggest to-do list, I can promise you. I got more work to do than any of those guys. And
it's almost easier to be a bad team and get better, right?
I don't know. At the end of the day, I feel like we're the worst team every day. So I don't know if that's just how I'm wired or what, and maybe I'm screwed up, but I feel like there's a mountain sometimes on me that we got to make this move. We got to get this done. We got to get this player re-signed. We got to get, there's players that I see we're drafting at 22 that I'm going, man, how is this guy going to get to us? Man, what he could do for us if I could get him. So it's hard to sleep these days between now and April. Just my mind won't slow down. But it's exciting for our organization where we're at, and I'm looking forward to what we can do this offseason.
Last question for me. How soon, and maybe they've already started happening, how soon does the phone start ringing about teams and their desire and willingness to move around in the draft in the top of the first round? How soon do those phone calls start happening?
Yeah, I think never say never here, but I think owners' meetings is when that will start happening. You'll have somebody saddle up to you and say, hey, because by then – you've been to a lot of pro days, you've been to the combine, you've been around these players, and teams have maybe started to fall in love with a guy. I had a team approach me at Alabama's pro day last year and said, hey, we're down below you. We think there's going to be a player there that we like, and we think that's going to be the sweet spot. And, they still called me on draft day, but Ed was there, so I wasn't moving back.
Easy.
But it's always great if you've got a couple guys that you're targeting to also have someone in your hip pocket that says, if you don't have a guy you're targeting, you can call us.
Sure.
We'll take your pick and move back.
Well, here's who are you going to sidle up to and draft day? Say there's a
Yeah,
guy,
you're a
there's a guy
sidler.
right in
I
our
know. I've
sweet.
seen you
There's
sidle.
there's a sweet spot up there that we might want to get to.
You ever see that
I'm not a
Seinfeld?
trader. I like to just sit right where I'm at every round and take every pick. So,
not true.
Is my nose growing?
Perfect. Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
Thank you for this.
Great seeing you, Brandon. Have a
Appreciate
great
it. You
week.
too. All right,
Brandon
thanks, guys.
Beane, the Bills GM. We're back with more in a moment. One Bills Live from the NFL Scouting Combine. This is Buffalo Bills Radio.